Okay, we are going to begin our next podcast starting in our new unit. This unit is going to be going into metabolism and energy and workings within the cell. So we'll begin with the chapter about energy and metabolism. Metabolism is the collection of all the chemical reactions that take place in the cell to either utilize energy or to make energy. But we'll start with some chapters about energy and metabolism, and then we will get into some of the major metabolic reactions such as cellular respiration, photosynthesis, um, and then also included in this unit is going to be a process of cell division. So that's going to be the topics for this unit, but this podcast will just deal with introducing energy and metabolism. So we start in our outline by kind of defining energy and just state that it's the ability to produce change in a state of motion um, of matter. And matter's anything in the universe that takes up space. So there's different forms of energy, and this diagram here, this image here shows some of those different forms. The different forms of energy can be described as either energy of motion or energy that is stored. So the stored energy is potential energy, and the energy of motion is kinetic energy. So here in our example here, this diver here on the platform has potential energy. Um, and then when he dives off, that potential energy is converted to kinetic energy. Climbing up converts the kinetic energy of the muscles in the muscles to potential energy. So that's an example of the types of energy. Now, in the study of energy, which we're going to look at, are held in the bonds in these metabolic reaction. There's some laws that affect some of this that apply to our study of energy. They're called the laws of thermodynamics, the laws of thermodynamics. And the ones that are going to really apply to us are the first and second laws of thermodynamics. The first being what is called the law of conservation, is sometimes phrased as the law of conservation. And this basically states that the energy is constant. The amount of energy in the universe is constant. It can be transformed, but it can't be created. We can't make any new energy without having some other form to transform it, some other energy held in maybe a different form and then transform it. So it's the law of the conservation of energy. That applies to us in the study of energy. The other law is the second law of thermodynamics, and that just goes on to state when we do transfer or transform energy, there is a loss. Every energy transfer or transformation increases a loss of energy in a state. Um, so this is sometimes stated in the phrase entropy, which is kind of a measure of randomness or disorder. So when we transfer energy, there's going to be a loss of order in that state that it came from. So we can see this. Here's an example of this cheetah here. The first law, basically the law of conservation, the chemical energy that's held in the bonds of the molecule of this deer that the cheetah is eating here. Nice bloody image. But the cheetah is feeding off of this, and the energy that it's getting is in the molecular form, and the amount of energy is not changing. So he's getting that in, and those molecules are going to convert to energy that he can use to run through the field, like this right here, through cellular respiration. We'll talk about that process shortly. But so this is, but there's a loss that occurs, and that loss is part of the second law of thermodynamics. The loss in heat occurs as motion. This kinetic energy is occurring here. Okay, now in the reactions that occur for some of these processes and other processes either require energy, metabolic processes that is, either require energy or they use energy. And the terms that are used for that are exergonic or endergonic. Here's image showing this, the comparison of the two. So exergonic reactions are those reactions that take place in our cells that are going to require large amounts of reactants, and they are going to release energy from the bonds within those reactants. And then they'll have products that are the outcome of those reactions. Those are called exergonic. You could think about that as being energy is exiting the reactions. Endergonic, you can think about this as energy is entering. You have a small amount of reactants and energy comes in and produces a large amount of products, and the amount of energy required is higher in this, or is high in this. These are called exergonic or endergonic reactions. Now these are in energy can be released from bonds within molecules, and our main energy currency molecule that we have in our cells is called ATP. ATP is adenosine triphosphate, and basically it's your book refers to this as the cell's energy shuttle. It's also can be referred to as the energy currency molecule, but basically it holds most of its energy in the bonds that hold the phosphates together. So we need to understand something about the structure of this molecule. It's composed of a sugar, ribose. It's composed of a nitrogenous base, adenine, and it's got 3 phosphate groups to it. We can look at an image here of the molecule. All right, so we got our sugar here. See the ring formula there, and we got our base, adenine, and we got our phosphate group. There's 3 phosphates here attached to it, and that's why it's called triphosphate. Adenine triphosphate. All right, so that is our molecule, and basically what happens in our cells is the phosphates, a single phosphate will be either added or taken away, and we can see that right here, to either use energy or to make energy. All right, so when we hold here's ATP right here. It's got our 3 phosphate groups, and remember through the hydrolysis process, when a water molecule comes in, it can separate a bond, and so that can happen. And when that happens with ATP, it releases a free phosphate, an inorganic phosphate, from the other 2 phosphates, and then we can no longer call this triphosphate. It is now a diphosphate, adenosine diphosphate. But when that happens, that bond is broken, there is amount of energy that is released, and so that energy can go to fuel a lot of other stuff in our cell. It basically is where most of the energy in our cell is going to come from, is through the breaking of those phosphates from the ATP. Now there's a regeneration process for this to occur, so it's a renewable resource in our cells, and we can see that right here. So here's an example. Our ATP is right here, and when we use that for cellular work, different types of reactions, metabolic reactions taking place in our cells, when we use that, it breaks and releases that energy. It breaks the bonds of the phosphate, and then we have ADP and free phosphates in our cells. Now, energy can come in catabolic reactions. So, a catabolic reaction is one that energy's got to come in, and then we have energy that can come in and bond phosphates back to ADP, giving us more ATPs that can be used to fuel reactions in our cells. Okay, now these reactions, along with other reactions in our cell, um, can happen at different rates, and the rate at which these occur can be sped up or increased with certain proteins called enzymes. So they can speed up. They're very important in regulating and speeding up the reactions that take place in our cells. So a catalyst is a word that is used for any chemical agent that speeds up a reaction. And an enzyme is a protein that is a catalyst. All right, and so those are important. So here's an example. This is an enzyme here. They have binding sites, which is basically an active site, a region where the substrate binds to it and basically moves it through to carry out the reaction that is going to occur. It has so here's our substrate here. It fits directly in this active site. So they're very specific into what they will help with. So this enzyme, only this substrate will fit in there and move through. Once it fits in, it's then referred to as an enzyme substrate complex. And so they help speed up these reactions. Okay, that's where this podcast is going to end. The next thing we're going to pick up in is where a lot of these reactions take place, and they take place on membranes. So we'll be looking in the next podcast at membranes.